School for Whatnots, Chapter 32, Back at Ivy's. Don't you want to find everything out now? Josie asked Ivy. I just told you everything, Lucinda protested. Everything I know, anyway. Do you know where all the other kids from our class are? Josie challenged. Do you know if they know we're really human? Do they care? Do you know who first got the brilliant idea to make poor kids pretend to be robots? Do you know what's stopping any of us from just telling everyone the truth? Don't know, don't care. But that last question, oh yeah, Lucinda said. I know the answer to that. And you should too. If you tell you lose the chance to win any sort of scholarship for middle school, all the pretending you did, all those years being apart from your dad, that will have been for nothing. This stopped Josie. She remembered the way her father had said, the past 6 years are paying off. His father had held such raw, naked hope when he handed her the letter about scholarships. Even if she didn't care herself, she couldn't ruin things for him. She'd studied all morning, hadn't she? Like her dad wanted her to. Okay, I don't want to tell everyone, Josie said. But Max is a rich kid, Lucinda said. He's already got everything he could possibly want anyway. He was a very nice rich kid, Ivy said wistfully. Not like that awful Ashley at your school, Luce. Lucinda snorted and rolled her eyes. That Ashley, she muttered darkly. What's your favorite term for her today? Ivy asked with a teasing grin. Spoiled brat, poser, mean girl, no talent, wouldn't be anything without her daddy's money. Wait! You haven't seen this Ashley kid in a year? Not since 5th grade, and you still have a favorite new insult for her every day? Josie asked. And you didn't even like her or rich kids in general, but you're upset that you're not at a school with rich kids now? Lucinda dropped her gaze. I'm working through some things, okay? She glanced back up, locking eyes first with Ivy, then Josie. Look, I want all this to go better for you two than it did for me. But it's dangerous for you two to be together outside of school. Scrape together some money, buy a few burner phones so you can text each other without anyone else knowing. That way you'll each start 6th grade with a friend, even if it's not safe for you two to see each other ever again in person. Josie, you can text me if you want. In secret. Everything has to stay secret. You can't go hunting up all the other kids from your old school just to find out what they do or don't know. You certainly can't go looking for your rich kid to spill the beans to him. Lucinda's eyes flashed and she looked angry again. But Josie saw the older girl's warning the way it was meant, as a kindness. Lucinda was offering to act like Josie's big sister. She was offering to let Josie and Ivy learn from Lucinda's own pain, from whatever Ashley did to hurt her, from all the misery Lucinda lived through during her 6th grade year. Lucinda had learned lessons from all that, and she wanted Ivy and Josie to get the lessons without the pain. But what if Lucinda had learned the wrong lessons? What if she still misunderstood too? Ashley and Max aren't exactly alike just because they're both rich, Josie said, any more than the three of us are that much alike because we're all poor, or because we all had to pretend to be whatnots. Aren't they? Lucinda asked. Aren't we? She waved her hand at Ivy and Josie, both sitting on the couch now, their shoulders leaned together. Lucinda let out a harsh laugh and shook her head. The two of you have the exact same looks on your face now. You both look like scared little rabbits, one black, one white. Guiltily, Josie jerked her head to the side to peer at Ivy. Even with their differing skin colors, it felt like looking in a mirror. Ivy's eyebrows were arched just as high as Josie's own, and her eyes were just as rounded with surprise. The corners of her mouth turned down just as much as Josie's did. Josie remembered her kindergarten teacher calling her and Max 2 peas in a pod. Now Ivy and Josie were the 2 peas. But can't I be 2 peas in a pod with Max and Ivy both? Josie wondered. Josie's head swam. This was much more confusing than the geometry she'd studied that morning, than all the stages of photosynthesis she'd memorized, or the rise and fall of ancient civilizations she'd taken notes on. But I already, she began because she was ready to confess. She was going to tell Lucinda and Ivy about the note she'd left for Max under his laptop. The note he wouldn't see until he got back from his European trip and summer camp, because Max only had that laptop for studying, and Max wasn't one to study during the summer. It had been a little gamble for Josie to leave the note there. She was gambling that no maid would find it first in the midst of overzealous cleaning. She was gambling that Max's parents, or maybe this new school, would tell him about whatnots over the summer, and the note would be timed perfectly to let him discover the actual truth. And she'd gambled that her note was vague enough to seem innocuous if anyone else saw it, but specific enough for Max to understand. Because she couldn't let him come to believe a total lie about her. She couldn't let him believe their friendship had meant nothing, or that it and she were only make believe. But even as Josie tried to come up with the best way to explain all that to Lucinda and Ivy, Ivy dug her elbow into Josie's side. Josie was still peering at Ivy. Lucinda was staring at Josie, and Ivy widened her eyes ever so slightly and shook her head with the barest of motions and pursed her lips just enough that Josie could tell she was trying to tell Josie something without Lucinda seeing. Was the word on Ivy's lips no or don't? Already what? Lucinda asked. Come on, Ivy said, standing up and tugging on Josie's arm to pull her off the couch. We've been talking for a long time, and Casper's going to wake up soon. If he sees Josie here, even if he just hears her, and then he tells Mom, we're all in trouble. Luce, you'll have to ask your questions later. So will Josie. Josie, I'm going to write down my sister's cell phone number for you, so when you get a new phone, you can send her number to her, and she'll give it to me, so I can text you. And that's how we'll communicate from now on, even if we're all three at completely different schools. Good idea, Lucinda said. Josie let Ivy tug her toward the window, but she watched suspiciously as Ivy bent over papers spread on the nearby kitchen table. It seemed a little too convenient that Ivy had suddenly gotten worried about her little brother waking up right before Josie could answer Lucinda's question. Ivy kept her back to both Josie and Lucinda. Why was it taking her so long to write down 10 digits? Ivy, I know how you are, Lucinda chided. You do not have to draw Josie an entire elaborate portrait along with my phone number. Yes, I do. This is the last time I ever get to see her, Ivy said without turning around. Josie got a lump in her throat, but Lucinda chuckled. My sister, the artiste, she said. But now she sounded proud. The lump in Josie's throat grew until it felt too big to swallow. Lucinda and Ivy had each other. They also had a little brother and a mother. And for all Josie knew, they had a father as well, and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. Lucinda and Ivy would be fine, with or without texts from Josie. For years it had been enough for Josie to have only her father for family and only Max for a friend. That was all she needed. But now she couldn't quite get herself to see her father the way she used to. And Max? Even if everything works the way I'm hoping for, it will be next fall before Max sees the note I left him, Josie thought. Next fall before I'll know if he can stay a friend or I'll know for sure that I'll never see him again either. A thin cry from the next room came, followed by a child's voice whining, Vivi, Lulu. The handle of the door rattled. Oh no, Lucinda muttered. He's learned how to open doors since the last time I was home. Josie, you've got to get out of here. Ivy, your masterpiece is going to have to stay incomplete. I've heard art's worth more money that way anyhow. With one hand, Lucinda began shoving Josie out the window. With the other, she yanked the page where Ivy was drawing out from under Ivy's pen. Without looking at it, she crammed it into Josie's hand. Sorry, Lucinda hissed. Just don't let him see you. Josie barely managed to land on her feet out on the hot metal slats of the fire escape. Quickly, she flattened herself against the brick wall to the open window so she'd be out of sight. She heard Lucinda's voice go unnaturally bright as she exclaimed, Oh, Caspy, you're awake and ready to play again, huh? Let's go back in your bedroom and change your diaper first. Clutching the paper with Lucinda's number, Josie lowered herself down the stairs. She'd only gone one flight before curiosity got the better of her. Had Ivy sent her off with a portrait of Lucinda to go along with Lucinda's number? Or had Ivy thought Josie would want a drawing of herself? Or had she just embellished the numbers with her own namesake Ivy trailing from every numeral? Josie uncrumpled the paper. Then she flattened it against her knee. Ivy hadn't drawn anyone's face. She hadn't drawn any Ivy. Under the tidy parade of numbers beside the notation L's number, Ivy had instead drawn a building. But it wasn't a palace or a castle or a fairy tale peasant's humble abode. none of the types of buildings she usually drew. It was their school. And below the drawing, Ivy had written, "I'll sneak out. Meet me there ASA." Josie knew the last letter Ivy had run out of time to write. It had to be a P. P for possible. Chapter 33, Max and Nurse Beverly. Max didn't know where Nurse Beverly was leading him, but she certainly seemed sneaky about it. She crept down the stairs, pulling him along with her. Then she peeked all around before opening the front door. When they got out to the driveway in front of the house, she veered to the side. Maybe she was just seeking the shade of the tall oaks that lined the drive. That day was warm and the afternoon sun was intense, but it felt more like she was aiming for the darkest part of the shade, the places where shadows overlapped, the places where it was easiest to hide. In fact, the way she scurried from shadow to shadow reminded Max of how he'd moved the night before. "If we took a car, we could slump down out of sight," he said, and instantly regretted how sulky he sounded. "And if we took a car, the chauffeur would have to know where we were going," Nurse Beverly replied. Max thought of complaining that he felt too lightheaded and dizzy to walk because he hadn't eaten all day. He was probably in danger of fainting, but he wasn't actually hungry. He didn't actually want Nurse Beverly to stop taking him wherever they were going. And start fretting about how growing boys needed good nutrition. And here, let's get the cook to make you some nice chicken soup, and even just a little jello, little kid food, little sick kid food. Max didn't want to be treated like a little kid or like he was ill. But he did feel like a little kid right now, and he did feel even more head spinningly awful than ever before, even worse than when he'd been truly in the grip of some disease. He kept walking anyhow. "Taking a little stroll," Nurse Beverly told the guards at the front gate, "getting some fresh air." They waved her on and only nodded respectfully at Max. Nurse Beverly made all the same turns Max had made the night before, walking past more trees and gentle sloping parkland before reaching the scenic stretches of shops and townhouses, and then the school. "It's going to be locked," Max said just as sulkily as before. All the trash was gone from the sidewalks now, and it made him feel even more as though he'd lost Josie forever. The school itself looked dark and empty and dead, the way schools always did in the summertime. But then a stunning thought occurred to him. You aren't going to try to break us in, are you?" They were already breaking rules going to see Josie. Was he up for breaking laws? Was he willing to become a criminal to get to Josie? "Yes, because she told me herself she is real, or she wrote it anyway, and this is how I'm going to prove it," Max thought. "And anyhow, we could always explain to the police what we're doing and why. It's not like we'd be arrested." "Have a little faith in me, Max," Nurse Beverly said, circling the school building toward an entrance at the back. "There are things that happened around you that you've never even noticed. There are people around you that you've never paid attention to." "What does that mean?" Max asked. "I just need to send a text," Nurse Beverly said, pulling a cell phone from the pocket of her voluminous tunic. "Who are you texting?" Max asked. "That terrible woman from last night isn't going to find out we're here, is she?" "Don't worry," Nurse Beverly said. "It's not her." She finished tapping away on her phone, then slid it back into her pocket. And then a second later, the door in front of them buzzed and clicked open, separating a good inch from the door frame. "See?" Nurse Beverly said. "Nobody will know that we're here." She pulled the door back farther, and the bright sunlight outdoors. Max was temporarily blinded, peering into the dark hallway ahead. "After you," Nurse Beverly said. "But if nobody knows that we're here, who opened the door?" Max asked. "You'll see," Nurse Beverly said. Max felt more confused than ever. But he did have faith in Nurse Beverly. He did trust her. He kept walking forward, straight into the darkness. Chapter 34, Josie and Ivy Reunited. Josie didn't have to wait until she got to school before she saw Ivy again. Josie had just reached the subway platform at the stop near Ivy's apartment when she saw Ivy sprinting down the stairs from the street above. Josie waved her arms back and forth like a windmill to make sure Ivy saw her in the crowd. Ivy only gave her a single curt nod. Then she meandered over to lean against the opposite side of the pillar Josie was standing by. "Oh, you think we should avoid being seen together in case there are security cameras?" Josie said, loud enough that her voice could carry to the other side of the pillar despite the crowd noise. Josie heard Ivy sigh. Then Ivy scooted around the pillar until she was right beside Josie. We're going to walk into the school together, Ivy said. I don't think it's going to matter whether anyone sees us together here or not. Then let's just enjoy it while we can, Josie said. She held up her subway ticket. I spent all my money buying this, so it's going to be a while before I can get a cell phone to text you with. So now, this is all the time we have. I don't have any money either left, Ivy said. She tapped her own ticket against Josie's, almost as if they were grown-ups toasting some special occasion with crystal goblets. Maybe Luce will let me borrow her phone some the next few weeks, but for you, Josie felt a warm glow. Ivy sounded more concerned about Josie not having a phone than Ivy herself lacking one. That is, if my sister ever speaks to me again after this, Ivy said glumly. Hey, remember when we were in kindergarten or first grade and the teacher read us Jack and the Beanstalk? Josie asked. And the teacher stopped the story after Jack bought the beans and she had the whole class vote on whether he'd make a good choice or a bad choice, and you, Max, and me were the only ones who said Jack made a good choice? This is like that. Like we just bought magic beans instead of doing the practical thing. You think there's going to be a goose that lays golden eggs at the end of her story? Ivy asked. If the golden eggs are adventure, Josie said. Truth, finding things out, seeing for ourselves what's what, having. She gazed slyly at Ivy from under her lashes. Having friends. You know, Max only voted for the beans because he couldn't understand what it's like to be completely out of money, don't you? Ivy asked. He didn't understand the stakes. I'm not saying you shouldn't be friends with him or anything, but I know, Josie said quickly, because it felt like she was being disloyal to Max, talking this way to Ivy. But why shouldn't she and Ivy talk about anything they wanted to talk about? The sentence Ivy hadn't finished seemed to hang in the air between them. Josie could tell Ivy wanted to end it, but Max isn't actually like you. He may have voted the same way as you in kindergarten, but it wasn't for the same reasons. He doesn't understand you. He can't. Because Ivy hadn't actually spoken those words, Josie couldn't protest. But won't he understand when I actually tell him the truth? To distract herself, Josie gazed around at the crowd. A messenger droid holding a briefcase stood in front of them, a bit off to the side. It was rare to see such a thing. Josie's dad had told her once that it was usually cheaper for companies to hire humans and not pay them very much than to buy androids. Josie had innocently asked, Is that why I get to pretend to be a whatnot? And he changed the subject. Another time at school, Max had given a rambling report about robots and androids, and he'd said, But our chauffeur says robot drivers would make people uncomfortable. So jobs that take a personal touch have to be done by people, not robots or androids. We've got a new chauffeur now, and he's funny. He says androids give him the heebie-jeebies. And then Josie had to pretend she was laughing at the word heebie jeebies, not the idea that Max was surrounded by whatnot androids all the time and he didn't even know it. Only as it turned out, Max hadn't really been surrounded by any androids, just lots of kids pretending to be whatnots. Josie studied the messenger android carefully. He had a rounded, bald head, a sleek white metal frame, and a forbidding scowl. The scowl plus the briefcase probably meant he'd been delivering legal papers. Hadn't Josie learned in school that certain documents had to be placed directly into someone's hands to be official? The android had 2 arms, 2 legs, and the basic shape of a young, athletic human being. But nobody would mistake him for an actual person. He looked too alien, too sterile, too humorless. Probably he was meant to be a little bit scary, so people would do whatever the legal papers said. While Josie watched, the messenger android's train arrived and he glided onto it. The way he moved, as smoothly as if he had wheels, made him seem even less human. He and the train were equally sleek and unworldly. Both of them seemed out of place in the hubbub of the train station, full of crying little kids with runny noses and tired parents yelling, No, you can't have any candy! Stop asking! And the beggars staring jealously after the messenger android as if they wished they had his job. Josie elbowed Ivy. It's crazy that anyone would ever have thought we could be like that, she said, tilting her head forward as if she were pointing so Ivy would notice the android too. The train with the android whooshed away. We weren't supposed to be like that, Ivy said. Whoever designed that guy wanted everyone who saw him to know they were dealing with a machine, a powerful machine. The idea of whatnots They were supposed to be as much like real kids as possible. Real kids, only perfect. So we were supposed to be more like that. She tilted her head to the side, indicating a beautiful, smiling, snazzily dressed woman behind the barred window of an information booth. She was assuring a man, "Yes, that train will be on time. It will arrive in 5 minutes. That's not an Oh, Josie said. There was something a little too mechanical about the movement of the woman's eyes, and her smile was entirely too patient. "I wouldn't have known she was an android if you hadn't told me," Josie admitted. "Maybe androids weren't as rare as she thought. Maybe she just hadn't noticed them. How did you pick her out so fast?" "I always watch the android," Ivy said, "because she took my mother's job. Lucinda told me. She said that's why it was fair for her and me to take an android's job when we had to act like whatnots." Ivy giggled, and Josie couldn't help joining in. Their laughter bubbled up, and other people on the subway platform turned around and smiled at them. "I feel free," Josie said, the word coming to her like a gift, "like I don't have to pretend at all anymore." "Do you suppose this is how Max feels all the time?" Ivy asked. "No," Josie said. "When he was a little kid, he was afraid of the dark, so he was scared a lot of then. There was one time when he was in first grade and his nightlight burned out in the middle of the night and he woke up and it was completely dark and he didn't know what to do. And sometimes he worries that his dad doesn't think Max is good enough in math. And math is what you need to be good at and succeed in business. So when Max's dad says, "Someday, son, this will all be yours," it doesn't feel good to Max. It just feels icky. Like Max will never be able to live up to his father and his grandfather and his great grandfather and everyone else who built up Sterling Inc. Sometimes Max thinks, "What if I'm the one who ruins everything?" So no, Max doesn't feel free all the time. It would have felt like a betrayal saying all that to Lucinda, or even to Josie's own father, like she was giving away Max's secrets. So why did it feel okay to say that to Ivy? Cautiously, Josie turned and watched Ivy's face. If she even has a moment of looking mean, even 1 second of looking like she wants to make fun of Max, I'll say none of it is true. I'll say I was only making it up. But Ivy only leaned her head thoughtfully to the side. She wrinkled her eyebrows at the same time, the same way she did when she was peering at something she wanted to draw, when she was figuring things out. "Huh," Ivy said. "I didn't know any of that." "Sometimes I thought it would have been good for Max to have my life," Josie confessed. "Like, he would have learned not to be scared if he had to pretend to be a whatnot. And if he had to sleep alone at school every night, or thinking he was alone," Ivy agreed. "Oh, our train's here." The two girls pushed their way onto the train and found seats together. Josie peered up at the electronic map showing the times the subway was due to arrive at each upcoming stop. "It'll take an hour and a half to get to school and an hour and a half to get back," she said. "So we have an hour to find out everything we want to know at school, and I'll still be home before my dad. So he'll never have to know that I'm breaking any rules. Can you get back before Lucinda and your mom find out what you're doing?" "I told Lucinda I'd do the grocery shopping," Ivy said. "I'll just tell her all the stores near our house were out of the good stuff or it was too expensive. And I kept looking and looking, and that all I could get was this." She reached into a backpack she was carrying and pulled out a small box of plain macaroni. "This will sort of be the truth, and I won't be lying to hurt anyone. I'm lying to protect her and my mom." "Right," Josie said, "just like I'm protecting my dad." She settled back against the hard plastic of the subway seat. "What you said before, did you really always feel alone at school at night? I always felt like there was someone there watching over me or over us. Didn't you always have a hot supper on a tray waiting for you when you got back to your room? Weren't your clothes always laid out the next morning?" "Sure," Ivy said. "I always thought the whole process was automated. And then I'd call my mom and pretend it was her looking after me. And really, she kind of was, because she was the one who'd made the arrangements for me to pretend to be a whatnot. Me and Lucinda both. I pretended I was living in a fairy tale," Josie said, "like I was Belle in Beauty and the Beast when she's at the Beast Castle. You know, before she meets the Beast, but when she's starting to figure out that the whole palace is under a magic spell. She always finds food waiting for her, and clothes and books. Everything just happens for her, like it did for us. That sounds really childish, doesn't it?" Ivy snorted. "You were in elementary school when you thought of that," Ivy said. "You were a child." "Oh, yeah. Being a day older And finish with elementary school makes everything different, Josie joked. Ivy rewarded her with another deep, rich chuckle, but then she let her face go serious. Isn't that true? She asked. Isn't everything different now?